Chapter 1. It hadn't been hard to find Rees Colback. The electronic trail he'd left all over New York had been easy to follow, and he was now walking down Fifth Avenue without a care in the world. If only he knew. The hunt was always easier when the prey didn't know they were in the crosshairs. A deer might be naturally cautious and take heed of every twig snapping in the undergrowth, but a man with no known enemies was oblivious to the dangers around him. And they were closing in. The rider watched him stop and admire the display in a department store window, one of the millions of people in New York City going about his business unaware that death was stalking him. For most, the end came naturally. But Rees Colback was a marked man. Someone had decided that his time on the planet should come to a halt, and now it was all about waiting for the right moment. She sat astride a powerful motorcycle at the side of the road, 100 yards behind Colback. Any closer and he might notice the machine and spook, so giving him a head start was the best option for now. On foot, he'd have no chance of outrunning the mechanical beast, making patience the order of the day. The strike would come. She could sense it. It was only a matter of when. Lifting the visor of her helmet, she scanned the avenue. Nothing out of the ordinary, no threats sensed. Simply a huge crowd enjoying another sweltering evening in Midtown Manhattan. A black SUV crept around the corner. Nothing sinister in that, but when it stopped and a passenger got out and walked purposefully toward Colback, she knew it was time to move. That was when a yellow cab chose the most inopportune time to double park and drop off a fare. Trapped between it and the sidewalk, she kicked out angrily at the cab's door. The driver rolled down his window to yell at her, but the rider wasn't listening. The man from the SUV was closing in on Colback, and that was all that mattered. The cab driver was still shouting and gesticulating, but the rider wasn't hanging around. She had business to attend to. She twisted the throttle and the bike leaped onto the sidewalk, scattering pedestrians in her way. Others were slower to react, making it difficult to avoid striking them with the heavy street bike. At the first opportunity, she cut back off of the sidewalk and onto the crowded avenue. Now, Colback was struggling with the man as the big SUV pulled up to join the fight. Eva Driscoll hated being right. Chapter 2. A light breeze blew in from the east, taking the edge off of what had been a scorcher of a day. The temperature had reached and then exceeded the forecast 98 degrees, and even for Rees Colback, who'd grown up in Florida and served in some of the hottest hellholes imaginable, it had made for an uncomfortable day. It was his first visit to the Big Apple. He'd followed the obligatory tourist trail, paying more than $50 to take in the view from the top of the Empire State Building, then walking to Times Square for more pictures before having a sandwich in Central Park. As the evening wore on, his appetite had grown, and he was heading down Fifth Avenue to an eatery his closest friend had recommended. Pricey, but the best steaks in New York, according to Jeff Driscoll. Driscoll had left the Army a year earlier, the lure of private sector money too much to resist, and he'd been working for a security firm based in Manhattan for the last 9 months. He described it as mainly babysitting foreign executives while they enjoyed a few days of booze and strippers. It wasn't the kind of assignment Colback had been hoping for, but under the circumstances, he had little choice. It would also mean relocating from Okeechobee, Florida, to the New York metro area, which he felt more than a little ambivalent about. He was due to meet up with Jeff tomorrow, but had arrived a day early to arrange temporary accommodations and to try to get a feel for the city. So far, it was much as he'd expected. Loud and extremely busy. A far cry from his quiet hometown. Colback was picturing the mouth-watering plate of juicy steak and baked potato that lay a couple of blocks south when his sixth sense kicked in. Years of special forces training and working in war zones had honed his personal alert system. Tilting his head slightly to the right, he identified a black SUV out of the corner of his eye. No telling how long it had been cruising slowly next to him. The tinted windows meant he couldn't see who was inside. He kept a subtle eye on the vehicle and quickened his pace a little, but jerked to a stop when he felt the hard object dig into the small of his back. Shit. He had been too focused on the vehicle and had missed the real threat. He turned his head slightly to see the man who controlled the pistol behind him. The short-cropped hair and bulging biceps under the white shirt told Colback that this wasn't a typical street robbery. Acronyms flashed through his mind. CIA, FBI, NSA. Whoever they were, they'd gone about making his acquaintance the wrong way. Colback saw the SUV come to a complete stop and the side door open. He had an instant to decide what to do. Given the way this was going down, he saw only one choice: fight. Colback pivoted quickly at the waist to face the threat, spinning his right arm around in an arc as he turned and trapping the assailant's arm just below the elbow, the pistol now safely under his own arm. Dropping slightly at the knees and then thrusting up, he palmed the man under the nose, breaking it bloodily. He followed through with his right arm, delivering a vicious punch to the throat, then grabbed the man's gun hand and snapped the wrist backward. The weapon clattered to the sidewalk, but any thoughts of retrieving it were tempered by the sight of two more bodies exiting the vehicle. Instead, a single word leaped into his head. Run. Colback's legs were pumping before his own mental warning even registered. A round from a silenced weapon slammed into the front of a building next to his head, and he took that as his cue to leave the sidewalk and run into the traffic. He almost collided with the hood of a yellow cab as he crossed Fifth Avenue, hoping to make his pursuers think twice about following him. A glance back told him he was mistaken, their tenacity confirming that these weren't simply thugs out to rob him. At the corner of 5th and East 49th, he took a left, dodging more traffic as he crossed to where a gaggle of pedal-powered rickshaws converged outside a department store. At 8 in the evening, the pedestrian crowds remained as heavy as the street traffic, which only made the brazen attack more worrying. Colback crashed through a large throng of Asian tourists and stole another look behind him. Two figures in leather jackets were hot on his heels, and at the intersection, he saw the black SUV tearing down Fifth Avenue, no doubt to cut him off at the end of the block. The armed pair were closing in fast, and he was quickly running out of options. He turned right at the corner of Madison and 49th and found himself outside a Starbucks, its outdoor seating area cordoned off by a half a dozen metal poles supporting red ropes. Colback had a better use for them. He unhitched 2 ropes and picked up the pole. It weighed at least 15 pounds, and the base made it unwieldy, but it was all Colback had. He held it over his shoulder like a baseball bat, listening.